Thank you, Secretary Raimondo. And from those long-time marquee examples, like career and technical education, art, music, theater, or physical education, to expanding examples of experiential learning, like Action Civics, Future Educators programs, P-TECH, it is clear that experiential learning is becoming the way to transform teaching and learning to best meet the needs of students. And I am pleased today to begin with practitioners from across the country who are steeped in experiential learning practices as teachers and leaders. I have the privilege of moderating the first panel, so please welcome these practitioners to the stage. Raphael Bonhomme, an educator at School Within a School at Goding, District of Columbia Public Schools. Peggy Brookins, the president of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Valerie Holtis, president of Anoka Hennepin Education Minnesota, Local 7007. Manny Lamare, Deputy Assistant Secretary, U.S. Department of Labor, Employment, and Training Administration. Zaria McLymore, attorney, community advocate, and graduate of Newburgh P-TECH program. And Kwesi Rollins, Vice President for Leadership Engagement at the Institute for Educational Leadership. Thank you all for joining me. It's wonderful to have you here. I would like to get us started, but I want to make sure I hear a little bit from each of you about just what you want to make sure this audience knows about the work you've done in experiential learning. Raphael, can I start with you? Great. So you started teaching before the pandemic, and you have kept teaching through it. As a classroom teacher, I'd like to know, what is something important the pandemic revealed to us about K-12 education in America?
Well, thank you for the question. Hello, everybody. It's very early, but K through 12 education after the pandemic, a lot of things have been revealed, right? I'm pretty sure in your states, in your cities, in your communities, even in your homes, you've seen a lot of change in kids. Maybe they're not brushing their teeth at the same time, or maybe they don't know how to tie their shoes the way that they used to. I say all of that because the pandemic did show that kids need to be around teachers. They need to have a hug. They need to be felt. They need to have support. And a lot of that before the pandemic existed, but the pandemic really showed how important that was. Now, ever since then, it's been hard to duplicate that for many, many issues. The pandemic has restricted a lot of places around the country about what teachers can do with kids. In addition to that, a lot of restrictions have gone up. So I would say that since the pandemic, it's been very vital for teachers to try to bring back that joy and do things with their students that have been missing. A lot of interpersonal skills like communicating, team working. Students have been isolated. They've been away and they've been, I guess, just given the opportunity to fend for themselves. Get on a laptop at this time. We trust you. Go onto Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Now kids are back in the classrooms and they have to be retaught how to actually collaborate with others. It's very, very important. And a lot of times, you know, teachers during the pandemic would do virtual field trips. But that's not the same thing as a real field trip. Seeing a llama on a computer is not the same thing as touching a llama or tasting pineapple. I've had students do apple tasting tests in science class. It's not the same thing as just looking and watching videos of other people eating apples. Like, my favorite apple is a Honeycrisp apple, and that's not usually what students really go for. They go for like Granny Smith and stuff like that. So, you know, all of those things are lacking since the pandemic, but it is very important to bring those things about. So a lot of experiences were missing during the pandemic, and I think it's been difficult for many teachers across the country to bring those opportunities and experiences back to K through 12 education.
Thank you. Thank you. Kwesi, you are a national leader in the community schools movement, and we've talked a lot about this, and so I'd love to hear you say more about how the community schools strategy aligns with experiential learning.
Thanks for that, and good morning. So for those that don't know what community schools are, it's really a strategy where schools are the hub of the community, and there are intensive partnerships that ensure before and after school extended learning, expanded learning, and really you bring all the resources, financial, partnership, love, caring, together around the school to provide the services and supports for a lot of schools around the country where kids who are not in well-to-do families or well-to-do communities aren't able to take advantage of the same kind of resources, opportunities, et cetera. So in that sense, it's much more than wraparound services. It's really an opportunity for everybody to come together and provide the kind of safety net that all kids deserve. Community schools, having said that, are the perfect kind of vehicle for experiential learning as part of curriculum and also as part of expanded learning. I think about recently, a couple of months ago in preparation for our national conference, we took a trip to Columbus, Georgia, and to a little city across a little bridge called Phoenix City, Alabama. In fact, you don't even know you're in Alabama. You kind of cross this bridge and then you're magically in Alabama. There's no sign saying welcome to Alabama, any of that. But I bring that up because the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley is one of the major partners that supports the community school strategy in that portion of Georgia as well as Alabama. And one of the first things we visited was Dorothy Height Elementary School. And Dorothy Height Elementary School partners with an organic farm that's in the area, and that organic farm is connected to a wonderful restaurant. And so kids in the community have an opportunity to learn about farming, to learn about farm to table, to learn about organic farming, to learn about food preparation. Just as you can imagine, the whole gamut. And their families also get to eat at a great restaurant. We had lunch at this particular restaurant where almost all the food came from this organic farm. And so that's just one example, and you can imagine not only is this about learning, but it's also about connection and about community. And one of the things that I think was mentioned in terms of the pandemic, you can't really get that love and connection in the same way in a virtual environment. And so having that level of connection is very important. The other example in Phoenix City, just across that little bridge, they have a boxcar, drag car racing unit. This is a little tiny school in rural Alabama that has competed with electric cars. They have a team. They scored first and second in competitions around the country out of 200 schools. They learn engineering, teamwork, problem solving, the whole thing. It's all part of their curriculum. And in the first speaker talked about the dearth of engineering students, right? So they're growing little engineers in Phoenix City, Alabama, at a community school.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Val, I'd love to jump to you. You are a union leader right now, and I know you are a licensed CTE teacher as well, and you ran an experiential learning program for students. Could you tell us a little bit about the internship program you led?
Sure. Our district has a couple of programs. One of them is STEP. It's called Secondary Technical Education Program. And just a little history about that. Our technical school was about to close. Minnesota Department of Education announced that they were going to close our tech school. So our community was very upset about that. So we all worked very hard, and with the school district, with our community, and with our state legislature to keep this school open. And our school district decided to put in quite a bit of money to add an addition to our VOTEC school, and that's the birth of STEP. And at STEP, we have high school students that attend this program, and they are some 10th graders, but mainly 11th and 12th graders, and they're able to focus on a variety of careers, such as cosmetology, what am I trying to say here? Cosmetology, thank you so much. And, and welding and construction and computer programming and cybersecurity. There's lots of programs there where they can actually gain certification to move right on into a career after they graduate from high school. And it's such a wonderful economic injection for these kids. Another program that we have is called Pathways, and that program is for students who are, have been diagnosed with a disability, either a learning disability or an emotional disability or behavioral disability. And I work with a lot of those students. And at Pathways, we were able to create different learning experiences for them. Because as a work-based learning teacher, what I did at my high school, I worked with these special education students to try and find them jobs, internship types of jobs. But it was really hard to have companies and other businesses in my community to take these students because they had no experience whatsoever. They had nothing to put down on the resume. So our district decided with our CTE program, our Career and Tech Ed program, to create this Pathways program, and we found an old 60s era mall that was vacant, and we transformed this mall into different work type stations. So in this mall we created a store where people donated clothes, so the students learned how to set up a store and had a cash register, and it was kind of like a Goodwill, and we would sell these things. We had an area where we would get computer components, old computers, and the students would take them apart and sort them in different recycling bins. We had a food shelf. We bought some industrial sewing machines, and students learned how to make flags. So we would buy flags that were already printed, and they would hem the flags with these sewing machines. We also bought some industrial laundry machines, you know, washers and dryers, and they would wash the uniforms of all of our high school sports teams. And that's just to name a few of the things we started at our Pathways program. So now, when I came to an employer or a business in my community with a special education student, they had something to put down on their resume. They had something to put down for experience in their application. So it was a wonderful thing, and I'd have to say I'm very proud of that program. In fact, it's been so successful that we're ditching the 1960s mall, and we've closed one of our elementary schools that had low attendance, and we're converting that elementary school into that Pathways program. So there's so many things that can be done, and you just have to think about who has the resources, who has the ideas, and who has the materials, who's got the money to do programs like this. And there's a lot of pushing, a lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights to get some of these programs up and running, but it's a very good thing. I think that my students are best when they're doing hands-on activities. In these programs like STEP and Pathways, our behavior referrals are 0. In my class where I teach living skills and how to get a job, and a big one, how to keep a job, they're not so good at sitting at a desk. That's not their thing. And I've had some pretty extreme behaviors, and the pandemic was not helpful in that area at all. It was sort of like this period of time where it's just Lord of the Flies, and they are just directionless. Students need that structure, and they need a direction and a focus, certainly after they graduate high school. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Peggy, you've heard a few examples, teaching and learning examples, and you are a board certified teacher in addition to leading the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. I'd love for you to talk about how experiential learning relates to accomplished teaching.
So, you know, Mary Catherine, this has been my life, my entire life as a STEM teacher. And I think sometimes people get the wrong impression about CTE. And career and technical education is every field out there has someone who has gone through some kind of career in technical education. And thinking about the fact that, you know, people used to think this was a dumping ground for individuals. It is not. They also thought that, you know, if you're not doing well over here, then we'll put you in the CTE area and maybe you'll flourish or maybe you'll learn some skill. These are highly sought after skills. And what the plumber charged me 2 weeks ago, I wish I was a plumber. And thinking about, you know, in our standards for board certification, and I started in engineering school in 1994. And just hearing about the soft skills, hearing about that sense of belonging, hearing about everybody has a place and can do certain jobs with the right instruction and also in the right environment. And so we brought in students who nobody thought could be engineers. And they are engineers to this day. And thinking about, we had honors classes, we had AP classes, and the experience of the curriculum that we wrote for them was experiential. Because I'm thinking about, you know, if you go to the movies and you can come home and you can tell everybody what happened in the movie. So we did our curriculum through stories. And I created a story with the problem that had to be solved. And in solving that problem, you had to work in teams because nobody works in isolation the rest of their life. You also had to have materials. You had to have a budget. You had to do research. You had to understand the mathematics. You had to understand the physics. You have to understand the social ethics behind what you're creating or doing. And these are all, excuse me, skills that students get in CTE. The CTE standard for the National Board is incredibly rigorous because those jobs lives depend on those jobs. And so when we think about the experiences that we can provide for students every single day, and I'll give you one example. We had business partners of Duke Energy and Lockheed Martin. You can make mistakes there. And one of the things that we did before we even created the academy was talk to the Economic Development Council to see 50 years out, where are we going? Who do you need? What skills do they have to have in order to seek the jobs that will be there for the future? Because we're not training them for now. We're training them well into the future. And for them to be learners, to be able to change careers, and to be able to work together in ways and learn things quickly and under pressure. And CTE does this for so many students. We also had a technical component that you got a certification. Our juniors in high school were certified in AutoCAD. They could go out as a junior in high school and make $20 an hour immediately, more. So when we think about the opportunities, and I would just want to connect it to young children and making sure that young children have these experiences and they expect those experiences when they're older. That they step into a classroom and they feel like they belong there and that they are challenged in a way that lets them know you have a skill set and that skill set is valuable, but to give them an opportunity to determine if they want to change career, expose them to everything. But I think we have to have teachers supported and give them the experiences that allow them to step into those classrooms and then give that to their students.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peggy. Manny, I think one of the things we've started to hear is this commitment to all of our students. And in your career, there is a clear commitment to all students in your work. And in making sure that everybody benefits. So how do you see experiential learning leveling the playing field for young people, and what's some of the work you've been doing to do just that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. First, welcome everyone. You all are like the super warriors that are here early in the morning, engaged, whether virtual or online. So just thank you for being here. Just really quickly, a good question, and I think it connects to two things I heard from Valerie and Peggy. And I often go back to this. A few years back when I was in Nevada, when working on policy and workforce for young people, one of the first things I did a statewide survey on barriers youth face to training and employment. So it consisted of both survey online, but as well as going across the state to do focus group with young people, because it's important to actually hear from them and hear their perspectives. Two things came to mind from this and connects to your specific question. The first thing is, I remember a young lady said, how can we get experience if every job we apply to requires experience? And so I go back to think about Peggy, what Peggy and Valerie just talked about. But then on the other end, when I talk to employers working a lot with industry, particularly associations, employers, labor, I hear another, when you juxtapose this saying, they said, we hire for hard skills, we fire for soft skills. And so when I think about when you put those two together, on the one hand about the experience, and on the other hand around making sure that they're prepared, what are then the kind of things that are consistent across the work that we're doing? And I think there's three things in particular that we see that is successful. The first one is there's meaningful exposure, right? The meaningful exposure is really intentional, that it's hands-on. So it goes to what everyone has been saying. When you have that exposure, then the second layer is how to ensure that it's, one, aligned to education and aligned to industry. So the curriculum, the training is actually relevant, and the individuals are gaining those relevant skills that is immediately applicable. And then the third thing, when I think about going from meaningful exposure, hands-on learning, is access to career supports and services. And this is where I think it ties into everything I think that you all are doing, whether it's in the audience or on the panel, is around being intentional around equity. And so in the past, when we talk about career technical education and the importance of alignment, now actually some of the best schools that I visited were all career technical education schools that blended those pieces and models together. However, now I think it's even more important to be super intentional, because some of the schools I visited, they had the highest graduation rate, the best connection to post-secondary, the best opportunities to employment. What we want to make sure is that to ensure that both communities, people of color, individuals with disability, when we really think about making sure that women are exposed, young women are exposed to a wide range of industries and sectors, how do we be intentional about ensuring that they're connected? At the Department of Labor, we've been really, really intentional, and again, thank you for the opportunity, because Department of Labor, we want to be engaged in this conversation. We have a youth employment work strategy that really in the past 20 years haven't really, we've been thinking about and really laying out this strategy around, one, ensuring there's a no wrong door approach to young people, but then two, when we talk about the work experience, it has to be a hands-on learning, but it has to be paid. We particularly, obviously depending on the age range, but we do think that's also a component of equity as well when we're talking about work experience. And so when we do pre-apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships, we encourage that aspect, particularly for the pre-apprenticeship, but of course in a registered apprenticeship, it automatically is a paid experience. So that's some of the work that we've been doing. We're also scaling for both young people that are, whether they're in school or out of school. So we have programs like Youth Build or Job Corps. We have Job Corps that's across 120 places across the country to ensure that young people, whether you're coming directly from the K-12 pipeline or maybe you're in between, to ensure that there's opportunities to those hands-on training so that they have those appropriate skills and to be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Zaria, we've been talking a lot about students so far and their experiences, and you are here as a graduate and as an advocate. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how the P-TECH program you graduated from aided you in your pursuit of law and community service.
Ooh, I love this question, and good morning to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. So when it comes to the P-TECH program, literally since day one, we were learning things like community building and group work. I remember absolutely connecting with the students that I was introduced to, because it was everybody's first time, but at the same time, that was able to start building our skills when it comes to networking. Being able to communicate with people. We mentioned that, the lack of soft skills and hard skills is an issue that we have today. So being able to communicate, to network with people, to get to know people, but also being able to be a leader, but also what's considered to be a follower as well. In order to even be a great leader, you have to be able to be a follower in the way of being able to listen to people. That's really important, and that's something that I've learned how to do, because when it comes to the community work that I've been doing within my city, Newburgh, and just to even give somebody a little background on my city, we're known, Newburgh, New York specifically, is known as one of the top most violent cities in all of New York. So when it comes to the advocacy work that I'm doing within my city, I'm making sure to give all of my community members as many opportunities as possible, like the P-TECH program had given me. I was able to graduate with a degree in cybersecurity while also graduating with my high school diploma. So when I was 18, I ended up going to also Brooklyn College right after. All my credits transferred, which was an amazing opportunity for me, because I didn't have to go to school as long, and I also didn't have to worry about all of the financial struggles that do come with college. And then right after that, I went to law school, and I'm able to, I'm able to advocate for people in the way that I would love to be able to see it being happening. So yeah, I'm just, to be honest, I'm so grateful for the opportunity from P-TECH, because it was able to once again connect me in terms of different opportunities and networking. I even did a whole TEDx speech within my program. So, and that was right before I had even graduated. We did a lot of different programs when it came to different types of awareness when it comes to the community issues that we see and have either right directly within our city or really worldwide. Yeah, so that's, it was a wonderful time.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, all of you created these incredibly dynamic descriptions and this wonderful view of teaching and learning when experiential learning is prioritized. And so I'd love to just open it up and you've had the chance to meet each other a little bit, but just visit with each other as well as me about what you've seen students gain as a result of approaching a topic through an experiential learning lens.
I think for me in engineering, all the things that we did, they were real life, real time. And I remember the first 3 weeks of opening the school, we had somebody come from Boston. They had a traffic problem that they needed to solve. So I brought my freshmen in because they were algebra students at the time. And he was saying, oh, we've had all this trouble. We can't solve this problem. And I said, just give us a little bit. He gave us the problem, stepped away, kind of let us know. And in about 35 minutes, students said, solved, got it. So he kind of chuckled, looked at me and chuckled that's impossible because he hadn't solved the problem. Yes. They presented the problem to him, solved the problem, and his mouth fell open, and he was like, you just made $50,000 in 35 minutes. And we said, okay, donate it to us because we would like it as well. And it's things like that. There's industry where we lived, and there were warehouses, and everybody who has those little icings and the decorations that go on cakes, we solved their problem too, because they had a pallet problem in that there was a moisture buildup, and that moisture buildup was ruining semis worth of, cake decorations. They came to us, we reprogrammed the program they had set up, we reconfigured the truck so that they could get even more pallets on the truck, presented to the CEO, and 3 of my students worked there right after that. So these opportunities that come up, I think one of the biggest is Duke Energy, who was our business partner, was having trouble. You know, people have to climb these high poles, they have to do all this stuff, and they said, we can solve your problem. We had a lot of storms, we lived in Florida, and we said to them, we'll create a drone. And that drone will come up, they will do inspection. It'll also allow you to real-time, first-person view. We use goggles. And you could fly the drone anywhere to say, oh, trees are down, don't send the truck in that direction. Let's just find a route for the truck to go. And they use that today. We did that in 2009, but that is what they use today. Those guys don't climb poles anymore. When there's a storm, they don't go out before they send the drone out to see what damage there is. Kids did that. They did it all.
So, before I give you some fluffy answers, but let me give you some more details and some things that I've done in my classroom. I'm not really sure who's in the room. I don't know everybody's name, and maybe some of you will forget my name. However, I hope you remember some of the things that I share. So, just think about your own experience with education and what you actually remember. Do you remember taking multiplication tests, memorizing multiplication facts? But what did you actually do with all that information? Why was it important? See, when I was a kid, I remember memorizing a lot of facts, so it was just rote memorization, and I didn't know why. Didn't really care. I learned about my local government, but who really cared? Because how did that affect me? So with my students, what I've done to have them experience and see why things such as civics is important, I asked them a question in the beginning of a unit. What can you change in your community? What can you change at your school? What is great about it? What's missing? Once students are asked a certain question or are faced with a problem, they're more attuned, they are more connected. So I'm hearing a lot from the older kids and all of that, but I could give you the stuff about what the younger kids are doing. Besides not brushing their teeth and not wiping their nose and forgetting to wash their hands, kids are really, really curious. So they know and they see problems around them. So things like rats, things like, hey, Anacostia River is dirty. Maybe there's a lot of noise in their community, or maybe they need some more bike lanes. I've heard all of this and some. Now, kids, to feel that civics is important, besides just reading about it, they have to go to the people with power. So let's go down the ranks. I've had kids think about what are some issues in their communities that they want to change. They reach out to their ANC members, which are just the local representatives in their neighborhoods. Some of these kids actually have gone past these people, haven't even noticed it, right? So now they're connected to somebody that might be a neighbor. It might have influence on something changing in their community. One student last year said their community needed a community garden. He sent an email with the help of his mom to his ANC member, and that ANC member thanked them and said, you know what, we are having a meeting just about this topic and we'll let you know. 2 weeks later, after the meeting, they reached back out to the student and said that in the next year they're going to make a community garden, right? So that kid felt like he did something. Even if he really didn't do anything, he still felt like he did something. He still felt that he was connected, besides just reading about the local government. Also, RFK, formerly the home of the Washington Redskins. A lot of my students play soccer or have gone past it, and it looks like something out of a zombie post-apocalypse type of situation. Now, a lot of the kids have a lot of different ideas about what should be done with RFK. If you don't have time before you leave, you could look up what RFK looks like or look the most recent news. Pieces of that infrastructure have fallen on people. So that's where that place is. But it's huge. A lot of my students had great ideas. Turn it into apartments. Get the football team back into D.C. A lot of this stuff. Hey, your teacher, me, Mr. Bonhomme, I can't do any of that. I can't change that, but you know who can? The local government, your council members. So what do? They drafted up different proposals, came up with different questions that were important, and we went to our version of City Hall. Now, we went to the chairman of the council, And it was very interesting because the chairman wanted to be politically correct and didn't want to say exactly the ideas that they had for RFK, but the kids felt as if they had the opportunity to be in a space where they could actually make a change and difference. See, that's what the difference is, I think, on my end on trying to teach elementary school kids. You can have them just read about it in the textbooks, or you can actually have them feel connected to it. Because when they become adults, they're going to naturally have that feeling as if it wasn't learning. It wasn't learning. It wasn't something forced that they had to do. It was built off of their curiosity. It was built off of things that they liked. I have more things to add, but I know I'm taking up a lot of space right now.
Great examples. Tracy, I saw you jump in.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that, because, you know, I just wanted to build on that, because if you've been paying attention to education these days, you know that we have a crisis with chronic absenteeism, we have low enrollment, and the reasons, of course, vary across the age groups and communities, et cetera, but one of the common threads is related to this whole topic of kids not feeling connected, and kids not feeling that they're getting something meaningful out of their school experience. And then sometimes their parents kind of saying, well, you can just do virtual today, or not also kind of being in that space where there's sufficient connection. And so I think experiential learning at its best really provides that opportunity. It builds off of intention around connection and meaningful education, meaningful problem solving. Who wants to get up early and get to school by 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then you're just reading stuff off of a sheet of paper, and you're not engaged, you're not excited about that. I wouldn't be excited about that if we think about our own experiences. We know the kinds of meetings and things that we like to go to. And we know the kinds of meetings and conversations that we avoid because, oh my God, can I make it through this 45-minute meeting? So I think that's part of the answer to a lot of what the whole country is facing, is figuring out how to be more engaged, how to be more connected, how to solve problems, how to be learning in a context where it's really connected to what's going on with your life and what's going on with your desire to have a better life.
I am so happy that you brought up the connection to community and having students think about how they can change their community. I have spent many years on my city council, and we had an issue of our middle school students, at the end of the day, going to the park next door and vandalizing it and just trashing it. And it was just sad. And our community really needed something for these kids to do, something that was structured and something that was positive. So it took a long time and a lot of effort, but we were able to build a community center next to that middle school. And we teamed up with the YMCA, and it was just the best thing in the world. And I always had kids in tow with me when I went to my city council meetings. And I'm sure the other council members were thinking, oh my gosh, what is she gonna do now? What is she gonna have these kids do now? And they had such a feeling of accomplishment and just membership in their community. And it was, and it was fun. They learned a lot about not using the word they. They need to fix this. They need to do something about our lines in the lunchroom. They need to improve how things work around our building. They need to improve how they line up the buses. There's no they. My students had to come up with who they is and how you can change it. So that's, and when they did see change, it was just, it was a great thing. They just felt so invested in their school and in their community. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about community.
So like what's been addressed is, once again, the main issue is that students don't feel connected to what we're learning in school. I can be honest with you guys and say that outside of my basic math, you know, what's needed, I don't use anything I learned in like a calculus class or like, you know, extreme algebra. Like, that's not my category. But in my senior year, what one of my school projects was to do a summer youth program. And that was one of my favorite programs that we had implemented, because we were getting a lot of like local students and like Newburgh talents performing at, you know, this program that we were doing. And it was like poetry. I did like, you know, my TEDx speech like at the summit itself. We had like different like middle school and elementary schools students actually be involved as well. They were doing like cute little science fairs, but what the actual topic of that fair was, what are the issues that you would like to see solved within our city? And then not only did we, you know, open up the floor to a lot of Newburgh talents, but we even like went to council meetings and advocated for the fact that we needed this program, but not just the program, but the solutions that the students were going to offer at the program. That's something that's important, because at the end of the day, once again, we need to feel connected to what we're learning in school. As you can see, and what's once again been mentioned, is that you're gonna see a student be bored in school, bored in class, like when, once again, they're not really feeling like they're learning something that they're going to bring to their real life. So the importance of experiential learning is to, once again, like just be able to say, you know what, let me actually listen, because I know I'm actually gonna need this in a couple weeks or even in a couple years, versus going to these math classes or something that really isn't as important to students or even maybe as needed per se, and actually bringing the real world to actual school. The point of learning is to be able to be prepared, but then also being able to solve problems within your own thinking. So why aren't we addressing those within our schools instead of allowing us to, once again, like just not really have the, I'll say like the opportunities that we really need within our schools.
Thank you. And all of you are bringing up these really vibrant examples, and it reminds me of when I was teaching. I had fall conferences with my students and their families, and they weren't that well attended. And they also, for anyone who's been a parent or an educator, those traditional cattle call conferences are fairly miserable for everyone. And so I spent some time over the winter determining, like, well, why, like, what were some of the barriers to conferences? And in the spring, I actually asked my principal for permission to set up, instead of doing traditional parent-teacher conferences, I worked with a local bookstore to set up poetry readings for all of my classes. And each class was assigned a night instead. And if you couldn't make that night, if your family couldn't make that night, you could certainly come to another class's night. And you could stay for the whole thing and hear everyone's reading, or you could just come for you and your students' reading and leave. And they were brilliantly attended. Students cheering for each other after they finished reading, and some students had prose to read instead of poetry. Those accommodations were fantastic. It was just a different assignment. And their families got to see their work and not just hear about their work. And it really changed the trajectory of how I thought of experiential learning for students and for their families. I had to break down some barriers to do that, and I am hearing these great examples, and I'm thinking behind all of those great examples was probably a barrier you needed to break down, or maybe a myth you needed to bust about the work you wanted to do with your students, or the work you wanted to do as a student. And so I'm wondering if any of you, with our last few minutes here, have some advice for breaking down barriers that are preventing more experiential learning, or what are some pathways that really helped you grow your programs?
I can speak to that. In our STEP program, we have several teachers who come from the careers, from their own careers. For example, we have auto mechanics that are teaching auto mechanics. We have nurses that are teaching certification to be a nurse's assistant. Now, these individuals could be making a lot more money in their field. So that's a barrier that we face all of the time, is to make sure that those openings are filled for those teachers. And what kind of professional development do those teachers need? It's a hard thing to figure out how to provide them relevant and meaningful professional development for those teachers. So what we do is we have an advisory committee, and we meet 2 times a year. And in that committee, we include individuals from all of the industries that we work with, and some of those teachers get some more advice and some direction of where this career path is going. You know, what technical changes, you know, do we see in the future? So we know that we're not going off in the wrong direction, and you know, keeping with the, you know, with the modern changes that each of these career fields are seeing. So just the advisory committee 2 times a year helps us a little bit with that.
Smart.
I think for me, what we did was provide that professional development that was necessary for teachers to step into the classroom without fear, and to be able to not be the sage on the stage all the time, to lean out and let students do what they needed to do. So I paid for national board certification for every teacher who wanted to go through the process. And in those standards is experiential learning.
So when I think about the conversation or the question around what are some kind of challenges or pieces, 3 things come to mind. Funding, perceptions is the second one. Funding, perceptions, as well as, you know, another example could be liability. I'll talk just really quickly in like 45 seconds about all 3 of those. The first one is on funding that we often hear like as a barrier. And so for that, one of the things I often mention is that the importance and the power of partnerships. And so this is why, again, just being pleased to be engaged through the Department of Labor, because I think oftentimes there's an area that solves one part of the problem, but another area is wrestling with a different part of the problem. So this is why we have currently, for example, right now, we actually have $95 million out for our Apprenticeship Building America funding, where you could, there's different categories where education aligned pre-apprenticeships, you know, apprenticeship hubs, and as well as pre-apprenticeship programs where K-12 partners are all eligible entities to really partner and leverage those funding. And so I say that to say, though, that think around and outside of just your traditional partners to really kind of dive into the different opportunities. 2, liability is something I've often heard about. And again, for that, I've seen different ways, and there's different ways to leverage and address that, whether sometimes it's the school districts may have insurance, but also depending on the program that you're doing, we've seen intermediaries. So we invest in intermediaries and organizations that really takes on the students, and so that to minimize the employer's concern. And I think it goes to a third one, which is industry engagement. Right? That's often another challenge we hear. Like, how do we really engage industry? Or how do we ensure policymakers and stakeholders in our community are aware and know that we're doing great work? And for that, a few quick examples I'll mention is that one is I often advocate for career technical education partners to sit on your state and local workforce boards. And really, so the state and local workforce board, they're made up of at least 50% industry partners, and to start building that advocacy and really articulate to those stakeholders, hey, we're doing a great program. Hey, here's where you could lay out your vision for your state. When your state have to articulate their vision for workforce development, making sure that they're actually connected and partners. And oftentimes, we're often trying to seek that partnership. So one example that I've also mentioned is that, and I've said before too, is that one of the things I've done is actually brought our career technical education director, and we put her on our apprenticeship committee back on the state level, so that now everyone's being educated and aware. So it's not just, apprenticeship is not just one industry sector. There's a whole host of industry sectors, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, teaching, and it runs the gamut. And then the final thing I'll just close on is just like the importance of partnerships. The partnership is really, really, really critical, because it sounds almost cliche to say that we can't do it alone, but I'll give you some concrete examples of how the partnerships can be leveraged. In addition to the funding, it helps us communicate better and reach the right audience. So I've been pleased to work with our Assistant Secretary of Career Technical Education at Department of Education to help us really understand at the labor side, how do we engage and communicate with the education audience? So one example I often say is that I might say RTI, and you might be like, that sounds way more fancier than it really needs to be. It's just classroom instruction. But in the workforce apprenticeship world, we say related technical instruction, but all that is classroom instruction. But also seeing exposure. So a few weeks ago now, or maybe last month, I joined our Assistant Secretary, Amy Lloyd, in New York, the New York School of Arts and Design, seeing students and industry and partners, like they're working directly with employers, but at the same time, the students are also getting that exposure and working that connection across a whole host of industry. So I just think like those pieces around the partnership, again, industry engagement, liability, funding, exposure, all of those are things that I've seen as challenges or barriers, but there's solutions to all of those pieces if you start partnering with the right individuals and organizations and entities to really scale some of those out.
Fantastic. Yeah, please.
So when it comes to students, I believe that flexibility in learning is extremely needed. So I was in a computer-based program, so I could have gained a degree in cybersecurity or networking. I chose the path of cybersecurity, but I'm not really an extreme tech computer person. So at the end of the day, I chose like more of the social sciences route, but I still used the opportunity that was granted to me to be able to go into the field that I desired. Within the program, I have my best friends. They use their cybersecurity degrees to do like biomedical engineering at Georgia Tech. I have another friend who's coding at IBM, but I decided to use my degree and go more law focused. So it's really just about granting students the opportunity, but then being able to, once again, allow them to kind of learn in the ways that they need. So I didn't even, there were internship opportunities for IBM that was offered. I actually chose to intern with like a council person within my city. And the thing is, once again, I use the skills that I learned from P-Tech when it comes to networking, being able to talk to people, and just once again, like being able to also multitask, because we were taking high school classes, college classes, we were also doing a lot of community work all at the same time. And mind you, we were also in high school, so it was like, that's a lot to handle. Like, we're 16 years old, like doing all of this, but it really did prepare us in order to be able to be the people that we are today. I know for a fact that I wouldn't be able to have advanced as an attorney at 23 without the P-Tech program. So once again, just like flexibility within learning is extremely important, because everybody learns at different paces. Everybody has different things that they like to focus on. So I think that that's really important.
Thank you.
So I would say, there are lots of barriers depending on the context. I mean, one of the benefits of working with community school initiatives all around the country is you see how those barriers play out in different ways. You also see that because the whole strategy is about deep partnership and collaboration, all of the possibilities. But I would say that, there are a couple of barriers worth mentioning. Low expectations. You used the word perception, right? Low expectation, these kids, because of whatever, can't really do this. The other part of the perception is sometimes principals, folks in school districts that have a lot of authority, there's a lot of pressure, so there's a lot of pressure in schools that goes up and down the chain. There's a lot of urgency and a need to solve complex problems, like low enrollment is a complex problem. Chronic absenteeism is a complex problem. And if you are a gatekeeper, a person that makes key decisions, if you don't perceive experiential learning or some aspects of that as adding value to your ability to solve that problem or to raise test scores or whatever, you're going to be less inclined to do that. So I think one of the strategies is really to understand in a deep way, what's the root cause of the challenge, what's the root cause of the negative perception, and to really make the case. So we see this in family engagement all the time. Most folks think that it's a great idea to engage families, but when it comes down to time to actually do it, They're not so sure. They don't know how to do it. They don't attach money to it. They don't understand the value. Well, you're not going to solve the enrollment problem without better engaging kids and families. You're just not. So that's part of the solution across the board. And being able to make that case to people who are skeptical is a good strategy. And so their skepticism goes hand in hand with high pressure, because you can't solve complex problems overnight. But you do have to be open-minded enough to try some other kind of solutions.
Yeah, thank you all. I think, oh yeah, please jump in.
So I've been pondering here for a little bit. Every morning I wake up at 5 a.m. to walk my toy poodle. So Mary Catherine, forgive me, because I already told her, like, I texted her very early and I had to apologize. But that's when my brain and my day starts, all right? So we have some middle school kids in here. I'm going to ask them a question in just a moment. But I need all of your help with something. I just came up with, hopefully, something that you could walk away with. It's threes: training, time, and I had assessments, but training, time, and tests. So I'm trying to go with either the 3 T's, T to the power of 3, since I'm a math teacher, or the triple T. I haven't figured out which one yet is going to catch on. You could all help me out. But I'll break each one of those down. Training. I've been doing a lot of work with the AFT for the last 2 or 3 years, especially post the pandemic, in terms of putting together professional development for teachers who are AFT members around civics education. Me specifically, I've been focusing on experiential learning, role plays, and simulations. The example that I gave was an example of a simulation. I forgot to say that even though that unit is done, the students have created a student council, and they're meeting weekly. Some students are bribing other students, bringing gummy bears. I don't want to talk about that right now, but they're learning real politics at an early age. All right? Now, the training. Teachers need more training. As I said, the AFT has created a professional development to provide training in terms of civics education and experiential learning. There are other resources as well. However, teachers do need additional support with that. So we can't just expect teachers to just bring this to the classroom without having multiple exposure to the training so they feel comfortable and it's not something else that's on their plate. So time. Teachers need time to learn this. It's not going to happen overnight. Give teachers some time. There's a lot of initiatives in education that if they don't see positive results in 2 to 3 years, then school districts, they'll flip to something else. It might be something to do with contracts and money, but I don't get paid enough to talk about that. What I need to tell you all is that teachers don't have a lot of time to let things marinate, you know, like kombucha or like beer or like sake or wine, whatever you drink, it takes time to ferment and to become something good, right? So just remember that when you go home tonight or late on Friday night, it takes some time to become great. Now, also another thing with time is that we're not given enough time in the classroom to actually do these things, especially since I'm getting to this third one, tests. Now, middle school students, do you feel like you take a lot of tests in school? There you go. I don't have to say any more, but I will. Because there has been an over-the-top focus on standardized tests. Now, if we're talking about experiential learning, I have a plan. I have a solution. I've been thinking about this for a while. Students can be doing experiential learning activities, units, from pre-K up until K through 12, and you talked about this earlier, of having things to provide when they are in 12th grade, when they go to college, or when they go to some type of training force or any other type of after high school experience that they want to get into. They can have a portfolio that is enough evidence of all the work that they've done throughout their K through 12 education. We live in 2024 where ChatGPT is very useful. So all of that stuff could live digitally, where kids are showing their products, their presentations throughout their whole academic career to provide something that will also be with the SATs, that will also be with their GPA. Because mind you, I'm up here talking on the stage, and I fell asleep during my SAT 3 times. So my GPA in high school would not have predicted that I would be in a position that I'm at right now. So if there were portfolios and things that existed that I could bring that, people would have believed in me much more back then. So I believe in a lot of my students, and then in addition to tests, state assessments and all of that, there's too much emphasis on that. And like I said, that's another question, that's another topic, but I'm pretty sure that there are multiple ways of assessing students' intelligences. Howard Gardner said it back in the 80s. A lot of us are familiar with that, so I'm at awe that we don't have that down together. So those 3 T's, whatever you like, training, time, and test, please keep those in mind. And I think those are some of the things that can actually change whatever is stopping teachers from implementing this stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This has just been an incredibly invigorating conversation. And thank you all. Right now, across the country, unless they're on spring break, there are millions of students and educators and community organizations working right now to strengthen teaching and learning conditions. And thank you so much for giving the audience here and virtually a glimpse of everything that goes into that, and quite frankly, everything that comes out of that for educators and for our students, from our earliest learners through those students who get to graduate to whatever comes next for their future. I want to thank you. Please thank this panel for me. Thank you for sharing your expertise.